lots of food for thought. And who better than our eminent panelists to discuss these trends, challenges, and predictions? Let me quickly introduce the discussants for the day. Chandrakant Gadhia, who's President, Business Strategy, Finance, and Operations at Marks Emballage. Ashesh Mukherjee, Vice President and BU Head, Sheetfed Offset, Ziegwerk India. Ashwini Deshpande, Co-Founder, Director at Elephant Design. Gautham Pai, Executive Chairman of Manipal Technologies. Priya Singh, Vice President, Production and Digital Resources at Hatchet India. And Ramu Ramanathan, Editor of PrintWeek and WhatPackaging, will moderate the session. Before I hand it to Ramu, I request all our delegates to share your questions that you might have for our panelists in the Q&A option available on your screen so that we'll pick it up and maybe post it to them at a later point. Over to you, Ramu.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, everybody. Good to have everybody here. There are, multiple reasons. I touched upon the fact that why we are dwelling on the ink industry, because it's been one of the performing industries in the past 24 months, and it was up and running even during the first wave. We saw that with the pharma sector, we saw that with the food sector and other essential commodities. Basically, three reasons why we have assembled. One is, what can we do about our industry in 2022? How can we make the most of 2022? And steps to get the print and packaging economy moving. Gautam, I'm going to sort of put the spotlight on you straight away. Again, I was looking at some media data and the pie charts were again fascinating. It talks that in India, there is an explosion in the digital space, but the growth is coming at the expense of print. Whereas the share of TV within the media pie stays steady. So anyway, this is sort of contrary to whatever is happening globally, etc. But unusual times. My question to you really is, as head at Manipal MTL, what is your assessment of the 2 years, and what do you make of it, and lessons learned, if any?
Yeah, I think Ramu, the past 2 years, I think, has been challenging. I think for many industries, including many forms of print, right? Whether it's print from a media perspective, like newspapers, or general commercial print, etc. I think generally it's been quite a challenging year. And I think what these 2 years have done is that it's accelerated some transformation, right? Just like how we have got used to working in different ways. I think whatever digitization was happening has just accelerated even really faster. So I think one is whatever short-term challenges which is caused for major businesses, but also it's created shifts in the the market itself, which is there to stay. So I think from that perspective, it's a little bit of a new world, and I think we have to adopt to what is happening. There's no two way about it. And I think while the changes in each segment has been very different, generally I would see that from a theme perspective, the digitization has accelerated. We see it in our daily lives in terms of how we consume, whether it's information or products and things like that. So I think that's one. I think that's pushed people to be even more efficient, whether it's in terms of using technology, how we look at, like you mentioned, workflows, all of it. I think that's been there. I think it's also kind of, in my mind at least, it's made, I think, some of the customer relationships, true relationships, stronger. I think India generally has been more transactional. In my view, it is changing. It is changing from a pure vendor to be more partners. I think while it is slow compared to many parts of the world, I think that's definitely there. We have seen the rise of, the platforms, which has been there in many industries. But I think even in print and packaging, we are seeing that we have, so I think there is an opportunity, and it's also a challenge. It depends on, that type of business we're in, type of size of business we're in. And I think in terms of the digitization, and not just in terms of production processes, but I think overall, I think adopting to, smaller runs, etc., is forcing digital, and with that, the new capabilities which one need to have to be able to handle it. From my personal thing, I think, there is, hope. I think it's an exciting, future. It's just that we can't expect it to be like the past.
True.
Right.
True.
So I think in my mind, we should not only have hope, but we should have conviction that we'll come out stronger, we'll be successful. But facing the brutal facts that we can't expect the past to be the future, right? So we will have to take the steps for the future to be exciting. And every step we take makes the future.
Sure. Just a follow-up. I mean, I remember one of the early conversations we had 2 years ago was about tightening the belts and, austerity. Are we still in that mode? And again, is it still austerity for us, or have things improved?
Ramu, I think the nature of a business, at least most of the print packaging businesses, I think somewhere in the beginning, while introduction was made, a word converter was used. The moment you use a word converter, right, and then there is not too much differentiation. That a lot of the softer things that people do have become table stake. What I mean is like quality, service, how we interact with all those things have become table stake, right? And of course, there is value addition. Each one is doing. There is some differentiation, but largely a major of the industry is kind of standard. So when it comes to that being efficient, to call austerity, there's no choice. You have to do it, right? Just to basically be there in the game, you have to be as efficient as possible. And you mentioned over the last 7 years, various plants you have visited. You have seen adoption of all those, bottom U-shaped workflows. We're trying to be as efficient as possible. But it's my view that, you have to do that to be in the game. But if your quality of business is not good, that will not still make you successful. Because ultimately, if your input margins itself is not healthy, then however efficient you are will not make a strong company. So I think sometimes it's important to step back, and if something is not working, step back and take hard calls, whether, we are in the right product segment, whether we have the right customers. You might have large customers, but who don't let you be healthy. Right. But it's hard to sometimes say no to that because, it's a big short-term pain. So I think for every business, it's important to reflect once in a while and take some hard calls. Because ultimately, if your quality of business is not good, however efficient, you may be the most efficient in the world, you can never expect to build a good business.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Ashwini, I come to you. I know you've been busy with the Pune Design Festival, and then, of course, yesterday, the boot camp, which is not design specific. I'm just curious to know what is, again, sentiment is crucial. Is it sort of euphoria? Is it sort of, taking stock of the situation? So what is transpiring within the, packaging design fraternity as a body, and, how are they coping with, response to what the brands are saying, what the market is saying, and so on?
So if I were to just talk about the sentiment, I think it's cautious optimism.
Okay.
So I think it's very, very positive. At the same time, we all know something could just hit us from somewhere, and therefore. But I think I'm just going to take a little something that Gautham mentioned, which is there is a book which is called "What Got You Here Won't Get You There" by I think Marshall Goldsmith. And all of us know that what we have been through and what we've managed to do in the last 2 years, if something were to hit us again, maybe those measures are not going to work. Maybe something else needs to happen. So therefore, I'm saying cautious, but optimism all the same. If you were to look at the packaging and design industry, right now there's a boom. So if you ask anybody if, how they are doing, how's the year been, they'll all tell you it's been good. Last few months, we've been getting a lot of work, all of that. But I'm going to step back because, Ramu, this is my 33rd year in the business. So I don't want to go through this whole thing of, a lot of work, boom, wow, great year, and all of that. I think if you look at the larger picture, and there's metaverse coming. So the first paradigm shift we saw in packaging was when the corner shop, the grocery shop became just one of the ways to sell, and we started getting modern retail. And we said, now how does packaging change? what should it do? Because now people can pick it up, see, feel, smell, and so on. So how should it change? How should it use all these sensorial possibilities? The second one happened when all of us started seeing this boom in e-commerce. We have clients who've seen 5 times growth because of e-commerce in the last 2 years, 5 times. And these are not small players.
Yeah.
So that is the second one, which I think I was quoted earlier by Shriram, that yes, now the packaging's first moment of truth is on this tiny mobile screen. Because any brand today is being introduced to anybody by the mobile screen. That's the first moment. Yeah. So how do we then, all the sensorials that we've gotten into through modern retail, how do we convey those through that small flat screen? We have no control over that. But the next bigger challenge is coming, which is metaverse. And I don't know if we even need to do packaging the way we do right now. And I think somebody just mentioned this cosmetics packaging, which is, you'll refill. Correct. Right? So just the way future of image making is not cameras. We all know that. We don't shoot with cameras anymore. We shoot with our phones. Yep. So future of image making is not a device. It could just be Photoshop. Similarly, I don't know if future of FMCG is packaging at all. And, in that case, what is it? Yeah. That's just the step back I want to sort of be cautious about.
Sure. You mentioned busy. Is it a lot of it also because runs have become shorter and multiple sort of launches? And the second thing is a lot of B2B brands, which we've not heard of.
Lot of direct to consumer brands, which are doing shorter runs for sure, which have an appetite for experimentation. So they want to do one lot, see how it goes, take the market feedback, quickly change. Startups have this huge appetite for agility and change. So that's also making the whole lot of work go up.
Yep, makes sense. I'll come back to this metaverse. I have sort of another theory about it. But anyway, Ashesh, sure. I'll just, ink industry, I'll just, volumes, everybody's been talking about, will it remain the same at current levels and with practically no or minor growth from 2019 levels? And more importantly, because we have a lot of your, probably your customers here who are attending, market instability that we saw during the past years, will we see stabilizing of that? Or we see no cessation of the prevailing conditions? So under the circumstances, what sort of message, and this not just from Zigwag, but from the fraternity as such, if you have a message for everybody here?
Thanks, Ramu, and good afternoon to all and everybody who's been attending this call. I think that, 2020 and 2021 had been replete with multiple, challenges. I mean, you have COVID 1.0, 2.0, and then 2021, you have seen 3.0, this Omicron variants of virus. 2021 particularly has been extremely high in terms of the, inflationary trades all across. So I think that things are adding on, one after another. So that is the kind of context in which all of us, it's not only ink industry, but all the associated industry and the packaging industry has been working in. But having said that, let me quote some interesting data from Nielsen. This quarter ending December 21, the packaged FMCG, which is a key driver for the, there are many drivers, but one of the key drivers for packaging is packaged FMCG products. That had witnessed a volume consumption decline to the extent of 2.6% in the quarter ending December over the previous quarter. Though there has been a value growth to the extent of 9.6%. So the key driver for the volume, because eventually the consumption of the ink, consumption of the paper, consumption of the board, it depends on the surface areas, and therefore the volume is a key driver for that. And one of the key reason for this has been basically the inflationary pressure and the price hikes by them. And interestingly, during the same period, rural market saw 4.8% or 4.9% degrowth. Urban is slightly better. It also had witnessed degrowth to the extent of 0.8%. So the question is that this is the data point available with us for the quarter ending December. The question is that what is going to happen thereafter, right? Whether it is continuing or it is going to continue or it is not going to continue, it's be better, it is worse. Having said that, one of the two major things, one is that of course the entire geopolitical crisis, which we have been seeing across Russia, Ukraine, and which is not really fizzling out the way we expect it to fizzle out. And everybody understands here that it has a very, very solid ramifications on the entire supply chain. So today, all the supply chain partners in the packaging value chain are impacted with that. And it has also led to or further aggravated the inflationary trend, which might impact the growth. But having said all that, Ramu, that I am very positive, and why I'm positive that that I've seen the past trends, overall past trend, not on a quarter to quarter, but generally, and India's growth story, which fundamentally, to my mind, is quite strong and robust, and low packaging consumption in India, which leads for a fairly larger room for headroom for growth, makes me stay very positive. So to answer you, my message would be that let's stay positive, but let's stay optimistic, but let's stay cautious. Let's keep a closer eye on the the developments around that, because as we all know that we are not a very linear world. We're in a VUCA world. There is a volatility, uncertainties, etc. around us. So I think that it is a need of the hour is to stay vigilant and to stay extremely agile to handle the situation. And situation is changing. The context is changing very fast, which has an impact of all of us.
Yeah.
But that doesn't undermine the fundamental growth story and growth story of consumption in India. It could be a temporary yo-yoing of the things, but I think I stay very positive.
Sure, makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. CK, one of the sectors which which was sort of up and running from day one was pharma, and at Marks, you and your team have obviously been vigilant, to borrow what Ashesh was saying. So. Number one is the dynamics that are at work with the pharma industry. And the question to you is, how do you respond to the pressures at that time? Essentially, your customers, which are, domestic based, as well as the international market. And then, more importantly, how did you sort of cater to these customers during those tough months? I mean, the idea of this session today is also to, doff our hats off to the success stories, as it were. I mean, there's too much of doom and gloom. So if you can just, praise yourself a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Ramu, for this wonderful session.
Yep.
I think, yes, we all have seen an unprecedented time in COVID, and we all had to rise up to the occasion. I think we as printers, we were lucky to be in an industry segment where, the business was still on, not so unlucky like the other sectors.
Yeah.
And we being based in a pharma belt, we could, get kind of I would say a heads up much earlier in Feb or something that, things are gonna go worse from here. And we could, align our supply chain in time, so that was, I think, the wonder that happened, or the magic that happened with us. We could, get some heads up on our inventory and keep things into control. And I think the biggest learning from this thing is, how do we tech enable our businesses? I mean, if you look at what all we printers do, I mean, the actual printing time on the press may be very small, but the actual time in getting a job onto the press is too long. Maybe from the start of the job to approvals to matches or everything. That's where I think we all had to, gear up, and, we started using WhatsApp initially. and then building up some kind of, communication flows to, do things quickly, where, the teams were very remotely based, maybe a buyer sitting in Bombay and a guy of approving guy sitting in Bangalore and stuff like that. So this was a big learning that opened up, in terms of our understanding that we all need to look at our businesses not only as a printing company, we also need to think as a tech business. Because ultimately we need to, empower ourselves with the technology. If Swiggy or Zomato's can do it, why not printers? I mean, why we can't, get an order and deliver within the next 24 hours? And this has actually happened during the COVID time. I mean, I remember, some of the sanitizer labels that we were supplying, we were doing wonders. We could supply within 24 hours time. This was only possible because I think there was no friction from anybody. Everybody was ready to cooperate. Everybody was ready to, approve online. Everybody was ready to, you know, give all, nods and approvals. Yeah. So I think this again, we all need to, adopt this forever. I would look at it to make sure that we are able to turn around things much faster on our presses to remain profitable. As I think Gautham also said, it's a time to reflect, time to see what differentiates our work. Is it the speed or agility? Is it the cost? Unfortunately, for a large portion of our printers in India, I think we have not been able to get that answer of what differentiates us. So ultimately, we keep on fighting on price, and it's a very, I would say, the balance of power is very tilted in favor of either the brands or, RMPM suppliers or the machinery suppliers, because they have every say in the world. Even if you look at, what has happened in the inflation, I think printers have got the biggest, blow. They have not been able to pass on the price rises, while RMPM guys have been able to pass it to the printers. And brands have been, they have hundreds of choices of printers because they don't differentiate themselves. So I think we all have to reflect, build upon this. And as Ashwini also said, maybe, we all need to even think of our business models, that we are not fighting against each other, we are fighting against new technologies. Even if you look at, say, tube laminates business, I think earlier every, cosmetic tube used to have a label on top of it. But today, you see very fancy printing on tubes directly. So that's, direct to product printing. There's no need for a label guy there. Ultimately, imagine a pharma company having learned from all this. We are sitting and doing a wonderful session, but they must be aligning somewhere with some new technology guy that, let's print, material on the bottle itself directly. True. Why have all this hassle of, printing and getting all the supply chain done? The world is fed up of supply chain, guys. So I think this is where we all need to, do it. Touchwood, we did, do good stuff during that time with our team and agility in place. Yep. But as I said, time to rethink and time to differentiate ourselves on more pillars other than pricing.
Yep, makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I come to you about my most favorite topic, which is books. And first and foremost, thank you to all of you for producing these wonderful books and sharing it with us. What I want to know from you is what has been transpiring with books. And I know for certain that there was talk of zero sales for 75 days of 2020. And now, of course, sales are looking better. So if you can, allay some of the misgivings and doubts, especially about printed books, I'd be grateful.
Downward trends in 2021.
Can't hear you, Priya.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Can't be heard. Oops. Try again, please.
Can you hear?
Yeah, now it's better.
Okay. I was saying that the trade books have bucked downward trends in 2021. In 2020, the COVID year, we had actually 4 months of zero sales. And I mean, it was an absolutely disastrous year. The conventional business models in terms of manufacturing and supply chain, they were totally upended and they had to be changed completely. But in terms of, I mean, in the last 6 months, as a relative performance, we ended up having a great year again. Online went dominant, and traditional brick and mortar collapsed. 2021 saw a major recovery. Most trade publishers had their best years ever. Our market grew, 2021 market grew by 27%, and Hachette grew over 30%. But even as a apple to apple, if we compare it to 2019, we have grown over 20%. The trade publishing actually, globally has seen a major growth all around. In the West, for example, they've not had one, but two absolutely stunning years. And this came from lockdown, seeing a major resurgence in reading as a leisure habit. In India, we went back not to leisure reading, but to reassuring reading. And therefore, we saw a lot of our backlist and children's early reading stuff, sales shooting up. And if you look at, figures that have been, published by Nielsen's or something, you will see that 2021 has, by volume tracked the highest volume in the last 11 years for trade publishing. And, the most, amount of money has been spent on book buying in the last 11 years. Even as a, a number of ISBNs that have been tracked by them, it has seen a rise of 9%, and it is about 333,000 ISBNs that they have managed to track.
But, these would be only for trade publishing or across?
Trade publishing.
Okay, got it.
And but we've had, 2020 was quite a disaster in the sense that, a lot of the way we worked, with the printing houses and stuff, everything saw a major change. We were printing really small numbers. We were having to cater to online, which was very specific, and in terms of packing, everything, from it just changed, so the printer was no longer printing and supplying to the warehouse or just packing and handing over to the transporter. It was a major change. And but luckily, everybody, it was this eventually had to happen maybe 5-6 years down the line, which was accelerated by COVID, and we had to do this and be on top of things in very fast. So by after the 4 months of no sales, when the markets opened up and we started supplying, we were drowning. We were drowning in the way supplies had to be made, in the way invoicing was done, and everything. It was just a sudden change, and we all had to just gear up and make adjustments, learn as we go, and just be on top of things. It was a major struggle, I think, both for a publishing house, for us here, or the printers. It was a major time of upheaval, and coming on top of things. A very stressful time, but in spite of all of that, I think we've seen a very positive coming together, of this partnership, which has worked in our favor, and we have ended up, giving the best year, in spite of everything. Yeah, so I think, we are very positive about how the book is not going to go away anywhere. Digital is not going to take over. In spite of everything, all the rumors, etc., that, ebook sales are going to go up and everything, none of that happened. Even the offset runs haven't reduced, so it is what we came to was a very, walking the tightrope as to when to do digital, when to go offset, and for the same title, how to switch from one to the other. It was a balance of that. And, the management of time with the timelines being really short. We are printing less and printing to demand. We also have to supply ASAP and without losing the momentum.
Yeah.
So I think it was great.
Yeah. When you say digital, you mean digital print for short runs?
Yes.
When you're choosing between offset and
so we go from print on demand to short run digital to offset. So these are the three ways we just keep moving from one to the other.
Sure.
Yeah.
So lots and lots of POs for you to do then in that sense. My My question to you, just to follow up quick one, is that you mentioned that there were trouble times at the beginning. Is this also partially to do with the traditional set of shortcomings that the publishing industry has, and or is it just COVID related? And if there was a wish list you had, I mean, we asked this of a couple of other publishing CEOs as well. Somebody said that we need 5,000 more, bookstores, brick and mortar bookstores in India. That will just ensure that you have people touching books and reading them and consuming them. And somebody said that there is a sort of knowledge learning deficit in the especially among the demographics of about 8 to 14 because of the high school rate dropout, etc. And these are impacting, of course, consumption of printed books. So in terms of wish list, in terms of how to boost this, would you have something which you could share with us, some insight about this that could probably be a boost to the printed book in a way?
So you see, basically, the way book consumption has started happening has changed quite drastically. A lot of channels, online being a new channel, and also we have subscription boxes, etc. For which the only thing that we have to gear up towards is to come up to a mix of from manufacturing to supply chain and integration of that, and how to basically be able to manage invoicing and picking, packing, etc., and bang on time, be able to deliver. So there are those changes that we need to get up to, and I think that is where a lot of thought needs to be put in, and developments need to be done.
Yep. Yeah. Gautham, I'm going to come straight to you, as obviously, as MTL and, operating in multiple verticals. How do you, in a way, respond to what, say, Ashwini and Priya have shared? Obviously, customers having their own sort of set of issues, and this, in a way, additional pressure of more service, more solutions, more turnarounds, etc. And I mean, is it sort of again a de facto thing? Is it something that the industry automatically should be, responding to? How does this work?
So on the book side, Ramu, on the commercial prints, I think last few years, I think the business has been trying ways to, do value-added services, differentiate, etc. So I think something which we added few years back is the whole logistics part of it.
Yeah.
So, and luckily, I think because of the capabilities we had coming from the other sides of print, like the cards and security, logistics has been a strong point with multiple warehouses throughout the country, etc. So that's already been there, and I think that really helped in the whole process. And the print on demand is something which we have been doing, and I think it's accelerated, like Priya said. And then the third thing, which also we have started doing, is where we actually sell on the marketplaces, the books itself, by getting the content from the publishers. So I think all those three areas, accelerated again with COVID. And it's been quite an easy transformation. I think the only challenge that we had faced was to cope up with the volume, not of the production, but handling the volume of content on the digital side. And that's, I think, something which the team figured out, but it took 60 to 90 days to get that right.
So would this mean more short runs, smaller inventories?
Yeah, of course. It's short run, small inventories, and especially I think on the single book production where you sell on marketplaces, you have to be able to process, if you're doing 3,000-4,000 books a day or whatever the volume is, to process that kind of content for single production. That was something which the system was not used to. Well, it was used to short run production on digital. It was not used to large number of single book copies. So.
Got it. And can you share, when you say logistics, being a strong point in your armory, if there are one or two things, again, just for the larger audience, that what do you mean? Because, sorry.
Yeah, I think the logistics is that I think the ability to do various things like one, warehousing itself, right? That has always been there, where we store products for customers. The ability to collate and pack. So if for a student, for example, if there are 10 products which needs to be packaged and sent directly to the student,
right,
that capability has always been there. And then because the print management business, we are used to having a network of printers in the country and able to deliver to the last mile, multiple locations. So whenever there was a special need which came from customers, we could mix and match the various capabilities to find a solution quickly. It was not something which the system was not used to.
Yep. Ashwini, this is a lot of it is the nuts and bolts of production, nuts and bolts of delivery, etc. What is, from your perspective, what is the trends you've been seeing in terms of consumer behavior? Millennials, different demographics, also especially this thing, because again, this was much discussed, brand loyalty. Is there, so there were two schools of thought. That one is that there is multiple brand loyalties, especially during the first phase when people wanted a certain security, etc., when they were making their essential commodity purchase. And the other thing was also this thing of nutritional purchases, which was, again, I think it rose through the roof. So again, what type of conversations were you picking up? And again, is there something for us as a broader fraternity to be, taking cognizance of?
Yeah, so thanks. This is a good question, and I like to answer it in 2 or 3 ways. First way is, I think I'll start with what you asked in the end, which is what kind of conversations were we picking up?
Sure.
I think there was one word that came in every single conversation is the word is immunity.
Yeah.
And I think consumers were looking for immunity through everything they were buying. Strangely, we used to believe that only food or supplements give you immunity, but I think consumers were looking at as weird as detergents to give them immunity. And that's also the bombarding of social media and all kinds of information crisscrossing, and nobody knows what is the authentic information and so on. So I think taking care of your health when you are buying something was not really on anybody's mind prior to these 2 years. But what you consume, what you buy, what you do with yourself, your own body, is something that has impact on how it deals with anything like a COVID. Was a big realization. And therefore, I think this whole thing of questioning before you buy. So the autopilot purchases really changed.
Yeah.
There were several brands which had become legacy brands and trusted purely because they were there in large scale, they were promoting heavily, and they were on top of mind recall. And they had become autopilot choices. I think that got really shifted because there's no more this thing of, because it was done earlier, now I'll continue doing it. Because now the question is it good for me? Is it good for my family? And so on. So immunity was a big conversation, be it consumers or be it even the marketeers, R&D. Everybody was trying to go through their R&D and see what is it that they could offer with that, with the immunity. So that was one. If I were to purely look at the consumer side, I think the consumers started looking at, especially after the second wave and all that it did, everybody believed that I deserve better. So it's like I need an upgrade. I deserve better. And that upgrade didn't mean luxury. It meant better for me. It meant healthier for me, or it meant healthier or better for the planet. So all these kind of consciousness triggers started appearing in conversations and decision making. So I think that was a big shift, big trend, better for better for whoever it is, whether it's myself, family, my colleagues, my work, and ultimately my community, my environment, my earth. So that's something we had never seen in this large a size of trigger. All the conversations and research that we had around all kinds of products, whether devices, products, services, financial products, automotives, everything. The question of, is it better for me and for the larger cause, always came up. Now, I don't know if those conversations lead to actual decision making or purchases, but they may eventually. It might just be the beginning. It might be the beginning of the ripple. And we really have to be very, very cautious now, because if we are not, we are going to be out of the consideration set.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm going to ask a really naive question. Where is one picking up these conversations? Are this sort of part of Insta Reels? Is it part of the chatter on Twitter? I mean, where are these?
So Twitter, of course, is the more woke community, and no doubt.
Right.
But we have been, so all our research of late has been online. So all the groups that we are doing, or one-on-ones that we are doing, and we've done plenty of them in the last 6 to 8 months.
Sure.
Because we really want to understand what's changed. We really need to know that.
Yeah.
And while we miss out on doing the ethnography part because we don't visit anymore as much as we would like to, we're at least hearing the conversations in a much better quality, because people are completely focused on what they're saying.
Yeah.
And the peer pressure that happens in a focus group doesn't happen online. Surprisingly, it doesn't happen to that degree online.
Yeah.
So we've been actually hearing real conversations.
Yeah. Makes sense. CK, I'm coming to you. This is about, you've been working with some of the, the prestigious global players, etc. You've also worked with one of the big brands for the past 12 months. And as you say, your team's got a lot of learning. Again, I'm asking this question because hopefully some of those learnings could be useful. And you've sort of been quoted as saying that it was like a Harvard MBA, production course for you. Now, so 2 parts to the question really. A, how? And B, what are the learnings that you got? And if you can just share 2 or 3 in lieu of, again, what Gautham and Ashwini just shared with us, so that something for the rest of the audience to take. Yeah.
I mean, we were fortunate enough to work with one of the global brands. And I think that really, got us to a right start and a right culture in our company. And that was a wonderful way of, differentiating ourselves at the workplace. So, I mean, I'm without disclosing much, I would like to say that, the biggest part is like very simple things, plan everything immaculately to the last detail before you take a job on the press. So whether it is substrate, whether it is ink, whether it is your running loxes, whether it is your print cylinders, I mean, get everything sorted out before you get to the press. Because ultimately then you will get the first print which is right enough and everything is going to be as expected. So no, unknowns or no, surprises on the job. So this is something I think very simple stuff, but not many companies give enough time or importance to it. And printers keep on playing, getting things right. They get it right 1 time, 2 times, the 3rd time they'll screw up. So ultimately, this is what was a very simple learning. We started from, substrate qualification, then we went into ink drawdowns, qualify that, select the right gaps on the print cylinders. Sometimes we feel, it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah.
But for there, the angle was, no, we don't want a single second lost on the production line ourselves. So whatever you want to do, you do it offline on your press, but on our side, we don't want any loss of time. So this is where, stuff like, again, time is money, time is important, and get everything right. Once you have everything done like this, then, it's basically, execute to the last thing, just print, everything is, matching. You have your spectros to tell you your right thing. I think as I have discovered this lately that, but spectro, I think, is the most cost effective investment for a printer. And I think apart from some of the, I would say, good companies on the, I would say, small and medium sector, this is something I think is not a religion in the press.
Yeah,
people still go with, visual, approvals.
Generally, the spectro, they say, is locked up. most safe. Yeah.
It's maybe the
so,
manager.
CK, I wanted to know if, and I'll probably come to Priya later, also is that these kind of SOPs that were shared with you, and then obviously, you knew that, okay, these are the checklists that you need to do. Are you getting a lot of this now from some of the other Indian? So here you mentioned that it was a global player, and obviously they have an SOP in place for everything that they do. But would you be also getting similar kind of SOPs from your other customers?
Yes, we do. I mean, luckily the brand space is, on the I would say national brands are there.
Yeah.
But not in, whole spirit. They have it documented, but not everything is followed in that right spirit. I mean, I'm sorry to, upset a few people if I would, but this is what the truth is. But yeah, that's it. I mean, just to share with you a very simple stuff. One of my jobs, we sent it to, a global location for them to test, and it failed our simple tape test. And we kept on wondering, we passed it and they failed it. Then it eventually became, we both are using two different types of tapes. So standardization to that level, is what they're looking at, so everything is done to that level. So the job has no challenge once it's on the press or once it's on their production line.
Right. Yep.
So I think a lot of Indian companies are there, but again, the top, I would say 20, 30 companies, but beyond that, not much as now. So I think they all need to, really catch up and do this, standardization.
Right. Priya, I know that the publishing giants have their SOPs in place, etc. Has that seen a significant change in the last 20, 24 months in terms of new things being added or new directives in terms of what can be done, should be done, quicker turnarounds, approvals, etc.?
Yes, I mean, yes and no. I mean, it's just that, everybody had to timelines shrinking and everything, we still have in terms of, I mean, timelines would affect the quality of a book if we are crunching too much and stuff, So that kind of sensitization, etc., is still there in the publishing houses that, it might, come at a cost of this, and the approvals, stay as before, so anything, I mean, for us from corrections to crunches when we want things done in shorter time, etc., approvals for them, they all stay as they were, no change. Even though the market and the whole business model may have changed, how we operate may have changed, so those things stay as they were, and everybody has to follow it. So I mean, in terms of, I mean, like, because we have seen a lot of decline in the numbers, for the front list, front list is basically the new releases, which is actually a marker for varied interest in reading, so that has seen a lot of decline, and there has been a lot of struggle on that front, across all publishing houses, but I think the process, how things would operate, the SOPs haven't changed. They haven't changed at all, except for the fact that, you will try to manage inventory as much as possible and print only to orders, and try to keep, I mean, the time frame is basically 2 weeks for any new release and stuff, so
2 weeks.
Yeah. 2 weeks, including supplies,
Okay. Wow.
In case of a reorder or a rerun or something. So
those levels of productivity did not get impacted at all. So
no.
Yeah. Wow. All right. I'll quickly go to round 3 because we seem to be racing against time. So Ashwini, I'm coming to you. This is, again, we talk of the technology, and I think that's something all of us have been hearing in the last 1 hour. And this technology revolution, which is sort of entered consumer consciousness, and the novelty factor, the aha-ness, becomes the main sales appeal for everything from detergents to coffees to other commodities. And the assumption of being new equals not just better, but revolutionized. Again, this is something we picked up as part of one of the Campaign India forums, and this was, a hot topic, etc. Has this become like this pressure of creating something new constantly and, inventing, reinventing, putting an additional amount of pressure, and as a result, the entire value chain downwards it starts? And I'll also, ask a supplementary as to why I'm asking this question, but mainly this pressure of new, constant pressure of new and, rebuilding, rebranding, etc. And what does it entail for us?
So I think this novelty is very, very evident, the search of novelty or search of new. And that is primarily also because of this, the media world that we are into. Unless you have something new, you don't make news. And unless you make news, you will not appear on the mobile screens of your potential consumers. So you have to be doing something new or newsworthy all the time. And there is a pressure on all the marketeers. And it's a tremendous pressure because it's not about actual innovation or invention, but it's about creating something. It's almost like creating news. And while at it, you may as well do something worthwhile for your brand, because nobody wants to do something hollow. Believe me, nobody really wants to do something hollow. And much of this is asked in a very, since you're sitting in Gujarat, Navu Suche. There is this question all the time, and it puts pressure on two parts. One is that when you intend to do real innovation in this whole race of introducing something quickly, innovation timelines cannot be written in weeks.
Yep.
Because unless you create something, you actually find the pain point, you innovate around it, you test it, you go to consumers, see what's happening, it can't really work. And that cannot be put in weeks.
Yeah.
I don't know how people can say that in my first quarter, I'll do 3 innovations. That's not innovation, right?
Yeah.
So that's just trying to create something or quoting something or, whitewashing, greenwashing, whatever you may want to call it. But it is creating tremendous pressure on the entire chain. And it is unfortunately also giving rise to a lot of failures.
Yeah.
Because when you are in a hurry to introduce something new, it's bound to have some glitches, bound to have some gaps. And it may not work well as you would want it to work, and then the whole cycle starts again.
Sure.
But it's in a way good because it challenges a lot of conventions of traditional methods of timelines.
Yeah.
And in the process, if we learn something by which we become more efficient, I think that's a good byproduct of this Navu Suche.
Also, just curious to know, I mean, like in the publishing, you have the front list and back list. If you have the equivalent in packaging of a front list and back list, does the front list just outweigh the back list totally? I mean,
no, I'm assuming what you mean by front list is something
new launches.
Let's say far more evident in terms of what's going on, and the other ones. I always have this theory of so when I was younger, I had 2 dogs, and one was a really large dog and one was a really tiny one. And the large dog used to look at the small one and think that I am that small, and used to almost behave like that. And the small one used to believe I'm so big, I'm fearless. Nobody can do anything to me. I'm so big. It's almost that, so both sides have their own stories and own images to sort of go into. And they have to be dealt with completely differently. They are not the same.
Yeah. But did your cycles reduce? Because you did mention that the product.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I think also because of this quest for novelty, the cycles have reduced. And the big trend of the consumers, which is being more exploratory. I want to experiment and explore more because I can, and I have choices, and it's direct to consumer and so on. So it's reduced the timelines for sure. For sure. Yeah.
And again, here I want to know what is the role like softwares play. For example, we have ESCO, which is kind of a de facto, and it's a sort of knowledge quotient within the industry, and you realize that it just facilitates. And at some point of time, ESCO claims, I don't know if it's true, that they touch about 99% of the brands, that produce any kind of packaging anywhere in the world, simply because of the capabilities they have. And there will be, of course, other ESCOs in the market. But What I want to understand is that within the packaging design fraternity, is there that high level of awareness now so that when the interweaving happens with, people like Gautham and CK, it's far more seamless than it used to be?
Sure. I think the awareness, I would give the credit not so much to the design or creative fraternity, but to the clients.
Okay.
Because many a times the clients have understood the benefits of getting into a systematic process-driven sort of timeline.
Sure.
And softwares definitely keep track, help. People come and go, but softwares help you keep the continuity, consistency, and so on. And I think that benefit has been sold to at least the large companies who have many brands and multiple SKUs and so on.
Yeah.
And we've had to learn the benefits through our clients. And initially, of course, we were hesitant because we know that we can't be investing in every kind of system, right?
Yeah.
But clients do, and I think it's been a great training ground through our clients, and would be the same for majority of large creative industry professionals.
Sure, got that. Yeah. Gautam, I'm coming to you. You shared an article last week where, and I'm just extrapolating because it was a fairly longish argument, that one of the great paradoxes for the print business today is that the financial prospects are inversely correlated to their addressable market. And even as revenues have fallen off the cliff, you were, of course, talking of traditional newspaper media and magazine media, etc., adjustments to inflation, etc., etc. Anyway, what the article seems to suggest is algorithms will probably determine the new markets. And some of that seems to be coming through in the conversations we've been having, and to some extent, decentralization. That's what the article suggested is better than centralization. Now, the question is that, when one travels to Manipal and sees what you've created in terms of the multiple factories, etc., for print, packaging, the other verticals, etc., and of course, the conversation that we've had over the last maybe 70, 75 minutes is that in this sense, what is going to, because there are people who are, flush with funds, they're looking at investing, thinking of creating these new factories. And there is, of course, the Euro model, there is, different types of factories. What is going to be I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but what is going to be the look and shape of this new factory for the print and, packaging fraternity in that sense? Again, all this, the churning that's been going on, plus your own, thought process about this.
Ramu, when you say shape of the new factory, you mean what kind of, how the factory will be different? Or?
Yes, how the factory would be different. Yeah, not so much the brick and mortar part of it, the processes. Yeah.
I think, Ramu, if someone is going to get into manufacturing or the current factories, how it will morph, I think it's basically comes down to everything to do with just efficiency, right?
Yeah.
And when I talk about efficiency, I think it's going to be a lot beyond the production efficiency, right? From what Ashwini is saying, using workflows to manage digital assets, where you can basically track different versions for different languages, countries. So I think the whole process end to end will be automated, right from tracking material at each stage. So you have visibility even to customers of what's going on in the factory. So I think it's going to be highly digitized, and the automation will just keep increasing and increasing. And if you see, it's happening in India. In the West, It happened because they were forced to. And when you get a push to a wall, you go into for more and more automation. So I think nothing fundamental will change. You may use different manufacturing processes based on how the market is demanding shorter runs. You may have more factories for distributed manufacturing. But essentially, I think it's all driven by going to be more efficient with a lot of information available for both improving the operations as well as for external communication.
Okay.
So nothing to do with the article I sent you.
Yes.
So
yeah.
That's a different conversation.
Correct. But personnel, again, the kind of trained personnel we have, the kind of people in the shop floor, how do we train them? How do we orient them? How do we prepare them?
I think, I don't see that as a challenge. I think today getting people over the last 2-3 years has become challenging because many things have happened, like talk about the great resignation, etc. So I think a lot of things have happened, a lot of new opportunities have come up. But generally, I don't see that as a problem because we adopt very quickly with just little help in terms of, reskilling. And some of this transformation is not overnight, right? You keep working on it every day.
Yep.
So I don't see any challenge in that aspect of it. Yeah.
Right. Got that. Yeah. Ashwini, there are two questions from the audience. I'll just take that to just get them involved in this whole conversation. Otherwise, it just seems like us. One is that, are you using personalized and customized packaging cartons at all? And is it for e-commerce platforms and or is it for, again, as you mentioned earlier, for the smaller brands, if one may call them that? Yeah. We don't have the name of the person who's asked this question. Yeah.
So certainly not at the moment for e-commerce players, because customizing for e-commerce players is a very, very complex game, and we've not yet had the opportunity to play that. But for smaller D2C players, the ambition and agility both are quite high. So at the moment, yes, we are working with a brand that is hoping to do that. Yes.
Okay. And Priya, there's a question for you. How do you compare conventional digital costs and how do you justify the business call? How do you compare conventional, I suspect that is offset, and digital costs? When do you decide what to offer, and how do you justify the business call?
Basically, for us, there is no cover price change when we do digital. The price of the book remains the same, whether it is offset or POD or SRD. So it is more a call of what the orders are, what the initial orders are, and if they are substantial enough, then we do basically we don't have anything that we go by that this has to be offset or this has to be SRD. At Hachette, I think we now flow into from one to the other quite comfortably and quite naturally. So if it is substantial enough, if we need filler stock, then we move the same book to digital, at lower margins and stuff, but basically the idea is that supply should be maintained at all times and almost at all costs. And at any point of time, no sale or nothing should remain unsupplied as far as possible. That is the main objective.
Sure. Ashish, are you there? There's one question for you. I think you've already covered it, but this is to do with the crisis of supply chain. And I don't think Zigwork supplies it, but web offset UV inks. Availability of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I read the question. I think there are two parts. So one is the news,
the supply chain issue.
Print. So I'll try to answer that, although we are not another in the business.
Yeah. I think your old hat.
So basically, yesterday I was talking to CEO of a large publication houses, and he quoted the same thing. See this, as many of you would know, that Russia is one of the major exporter for the newsprint paper, and this whole geopolitical crisis over there has caused a supply chain constraint as far as the newspaper or newsprints go, and the entire supply chain has become so critical and so bad that the industry is somehow managing the whole thing. It is really a big challenge for them, and it's not out of the place to mention that the price of news ink and newspaper has really hit the roof. It is hugely shot up, hugely shot up. As far as the offset UV inks for the wave offset is concerned, I think the challenges there is also to a large extent attributed to the back-end supply chain. So today, as we speak, there are issues in terms of some of the specialty chemicals like monomers, oligomers, or photoinitiators, which is largely imported today. So India is an importer of these RMs, and supply chain around that is also constrained. So I think that it is, but that is also, it is not only Europe, but India also imports large quantity from China. So I think uh, this crisis or this constraint on the supply chain on the UV inks has been continuing for quite some time now. The present crisis is on account on the top of that, which is the newspaper, newsprint paper. It's not newspaper, newsprint paper. I think both the things put together has created huge challenges, particularly for some of the publishing companies and the newspaper companies also.
Yep. I think I'll
Hope
go
that
to
situation is resolved.
I'll go to round 4, which is green. And Ashesh, since you're here, I'll start off with you. Again, in one of the ink industry forums, there was conversation about the SDG, which is the Sustainable Development Goal, and that the industry overall is going to play a greater role. Then, of course, the EPR policy, which was and the notification in October of 2021. So all issues of recovery, recyclability, reuse, etc. And then, of course, the classical debate, EBITDA versus, the planet, so to speak. So 2 questions to you. One is because I know Sigwork's been busy, past few months on this front. So if you can share with us a couple of the, initiatives that you've undertaken, and more importantly, the benefits for the industry as well as for end consumers. And secondly, going forward, where do you've also been having conversations with government at policy level. So if you can share both these things with the gathering, that will be very helpful.
Thanks, Ramu. So I think that there are 3 major key drivers here as far as we are concerned. One is that whole topic of product safety and the regulation. So we want to ensure that the product which goes from us is the safest. And it is safest inks not only from a customer, that means people who are, typically when I say customer, I'm meaning here the converters, from the converters' perspectives, but also from the end consumer perspectives. Ink goes into food packaging or pharma packaging ought to be as safe as possible. That defines the safety of the packaging. Right. So I think the whole topic of product safety and the regulatory framework, and when I talk about regulatory frameworks, it may so happen that that particular regulatory framework is not in vogue in our country, but the similar framework is in place in other parts of the world. So we draw a lesson from that as well. So therefore, when we design the product, as we go up India, we keep the whole perspective very, very open. So we wanted to deliver a product which stays ahead and which could be ahead of its time as we speak today in terms of the regulatory guidelines, but it gives you a safest possible product in the hands of the customers as well as consumers. So that is a topic on the product safety and regulation. Second thing is that having said that, the superior performance, so safety and then superior performance. So to design a product which not only a safer product, but also gives a superior superior performance. For example, as you said, very recently, as recently as in the month of February, we launched mineral oil-free inks, conventional inks for sheet fed offset. It's a brand name called Vega, V-E-G-A, Vega. And that product has been designed keeping in mind the performance of the product on the press. So be it's better strength, be it's lesser startup wastages, be it's its suitability on a very high speed machine, therefore supporting the productivity of the printers or the press or maybe it's a faster drying and setting and drying characteristics. So all these things have been kept in mind while designing the product. And the third is the sustainability, because eventually green economy, circular economy. So how you can design a product with a higher content of the renewable constituents. So all those things have gone into the design of the product and the production of the whole thing. So with this, you may stay ahead. I mean, not only you are staying ahead of the competition, but design a product which is a product ahead of its time. Okay. You may remember that a few years back when Zigwork designed and launched in the market the toluene-free liquid inks or the flexible inks, then there is no regulation available at that point of time. But we chose to, charter in a path which is, forward looking and which addresses the whole or championing the whole the cause of the product safety and regulation. So that has been ingrained into our philosophy. So the question is that eventually the customer always will try to measure in a INR per kilo as far as ink is concerned. But I think it is our equal responsibility to explain to them the whole value proposition, the whole value, and communicate to them effectively the value proposition. And that brings the whole topic of how you can decommoditize the market, because market is very extremely commoditized. So how you can decommoditize the market and how you can bring a product which is not only the topmost product, the best in the class in terms of the safety, in terms of the performance of the product. I think that is how you engage with the customers, explain to us, demonstrate to us. So there are ways and means and techniques to do that, sure, and which we are adopting. But otherwise, you will always find a kind of a different perspective from the customer's point of view. So why should I? Who is going to? You ask me, who is going to bear the cost? But at the end of the day, people must understand the kind of benefits which you're going in return is far outweigh the cost, additional cost which you're incurring. So I think that is the whole topic of value proposition, designing the value proposition, and communicating the value proposition and alignment with the customer.
Sure. Yeah, got that. Thanks. Ashwini, the question to you is that obviously this exists, but number one is, again, how much of it is, there's a trickle down, or there's handing, over of this messaging to the other sort of silos within the, industry. So that was number one. It's like public policy. It exists, but greater awareness, citizenship, etc. So that is one. Secondly is, again, if you can share, because you've obviously been having conversation with brands, but practical tips, biodegradable materials, using monolayers, those sort of things. If again you can share, and are we seeing a heightened sort of prod from brands in terms of having these conversations? Say, for example, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, as compared to that, are we seeing much more of these conversations where we are looking at people saying that let's lightweight the packaging, let's use more eco-friendly inks or what have you? So if you can share, number one is this, how to create an ecosystem of ensuring that all this knowledge is shared equally, not just with the converters and those sort of things. Yeah, over to you.
Yeah, so I think I've said this before in one of our conversations, that there's this very, very poor awareness about what is sustainability in terms of packaging.
Correct.
And the easiest thing for a woke person to say is that, why don't they use recyclable packaging or biodegradable packaging material? What does it take, and so on? And I think that's the most ignorant of the lot, who believe that all plastic can overnight be replaced by something that's biodegradable. I think that's, I sometimes feel that the ignorant are even more dangerous than the ones who, don't bother about this and agree that they don't know. So there are multiple ways. And as packaging designers or as designers of anything, we always tell our clients that you can't look at it unidimensionally. Sure. So we could reduce over packaging on one end, because there are multiple layers in one substrate, that's one part. Or there are multiple packs, as in there is a primary pack, secondary, tertiary, and so on.
Yeah.
There are multiple materials mixed with each other. which again makes it very difficult to recycle eventually. So all those are the first, let's say, line of attack. The second one, which is very, very rarely discussed, and I actually really have a question: do we have commercially available plant-based inks? I'm not aware, and I'd really like to know. But the second part is the complete ignorance about what happens to inks when you recycle printed paper or printed plastics altogether. And I don't remember the name of the place, but it's somewhere in Gujarat where a lot of recycling of paper happens. And many of us who still buy newspapers generally sell it at the end of the month and feel that, oh, I have sold it for recycling. Mere to sare paap dhul gaye. But the fact remains that much of that ink actually doesn't get recycled. I think there is a technique called flotation de-inking, and that separates the ink from the paper when the pulp is made. And that ink, I believe in that Gujarat town or place, whatever that is, I believe there are mounds and mounds, hillocks of ink that nobody knows what to do with. And the paper does get recycled, it does become pulp, it does go into something else, but ink has remained and it has actually changed the landscape of that town. So the awareness is so poor that needs to change. And of course, we need to get, I think I'm already hearing about inventions and newer products in inks, and I hope that just takes on its own trajectory. Then there are other evils which are very small to talk about, but they actually make a big difference when it comes to recycling, which is glues that are used which are not water soluble, or staple pins that are used that become very difficult to recycle when you put stuff for recycling. All these are actually points that they are like touch points that you can actually tackle with one by one and make things more sustainable. That's on one part. On the other part, when you asked about conversations, I think because the awareness is so poor that the only thing that consumers look at and say, oh, but this is not biodegradable. Oh, but this brand is great, but oh, it uses plastic. And that's purely because the awareness is so low. But on the other hand, in brand teams, increasingly, especially large brands, we are seeing sustainability experts in the team. And I remember when we were working for a very large aerated drink brand, there was a sustainability expert, and she said that if you just reduce 1 millimeter of the label, the plastic label on that bottle, I'll save tons of plastic. And I don't want to use the bad part of it, but let me just say, she said, then my sustainability report will look good. So, we leave that part, but the fact is that it'll actually do good to, it won't do anything bad to the brand by reducing by 1 millimeter. They might have to do some adjustments in terms of machinery while packaging, but it'll actually save tons of plastic eventually. So I think there are so many ways. We just need to examine each possibility and not sort of put it as one size fits all. One size doesn't fit all.
Makes sense. Yep. Priya, you have at Hatchet, you have a sort of green report card which you have to fill up, right? Some kind of a sustainability thing, and that's again, anything that we should be knowing, that's something that you adhere to very strictly, and which again the larger world is not sort of aware of.
Yes, Hachette is capturing and calculating our carbon footprint to help us achieve a future target of net zero by about 2050. And,
by zero.
By 2050, yes. So we have our own tools, etc., to collect data, and we report our energy consumption as a percentage. So let's say we're working with a printer, we report that as a percentage volume of printer's work. How much do we consume of electricity, LPG, gas for generators, diesel and petrol for transport vehicles. We report this for all aspects of our business, with direct consumptions in the office, warehouses, IT related stuff, etc. We have, clear wastage norms, etc., that we have to strictly follow. And as far as paper part is concerned, we have very clear procurement guidelines that is shared with all the vendors that we work with without fail. And in the past years, we have increased significantly the percentage of certified fibers that we are using in manufacturing of all the products that we sell. And there are clear restrictions laid down in terms of what is acceptable and what's not, including ban on paper and fiber coming out of certain countries, where sustainability is a problem, and we want to make sure that we are not using anything from there. And that is, we just have to follow it without any deviation. So nothing is acceptable. And yeah, so these guidelines are there in writing for everyone, for all the vendors, and we really have to sustain. I mean, it's
Sure.
kind of it restricts us a lot,
Right.
For example, we don't have a solution for shrink wrap yet, I mean, what is a very quick and cost effective solution for shrink wrap, because we have a lot of box sets, etc., which we cannot really, it cannot go out into the market without that proper packaging.
Yeah.
But I mean, we failed to find a solution for that. In Maharashtra, for example, I think a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, they had a sudden ban on plastic,
Yeah.
that nothing can enter the state, and I mean, suddenly a lot of orders were lost, because we
Yeah.
couldn't send out
Yeah.
boxes, etc.
Correct.
So that is one solution we have to find out, I mean, for future, where suddenly some kind of ban is imposed. But other than that, I mean, where I don't have a solution here,
Sure.
in terms of having a closed box or something, so that we don't need shrink wrap at all. There are very clear guidelines for everyone to follow.
Sure. Got that. Gautam, any initiatives? I mean, again, as an industry, we sometimes being accused of being reactive instead of being proactive. A, is that true? And B, some steps, because I know that there's been a huge journey that MTL has, I know 10 years, 12 years ago and today. So again, if you can, some sharings on this.
So Ramu, I think really not too much to share other than what others have already said.
Yeah.
I think it is, it is heading that way. It has to be done. But I think, it is small steps we take every day, right? I don't
True.
think it's a overnight thing which will change any industry, right? But it's definitely in the direction. But one thing I would definitely want to add, and this comes from one of our other businesses where we have a direct to consumer brand. We are seeing a lot of feedback from millennials and the younger target groups saying, why did you, put a bubble wrap in it? Why did you put thermocol? So there is that thing coming from consumers, simple comments, So I think definitely they're asking for it. Yeah. What's the right solution to achieve all the objectives? I think we have to, discover as we go along. But it's definitely in that direction. And I think with the younger generation, that's asked from consumers itself.
Sure. Makes sense. Yeah. I'm tempted to ask a question, is it possible to introduce, because of what happens within Manipal and this huge army of young minds that are, learning there, to probably introduce this as a course, what to do with plastic waste or what to do. I mean, just as a, small course, so that the science of it is absolutely clear, as opposed to all of us, hazarding a guess all the time. So just because, I mean, there is a possibility of doing that in Manipal, that's all. Yeah. Chandrakant, you've mentioned, 6 M's at Marks. One is machinery, one is materials, methods, measurement, manpower, and Mother Nature. So just to sort of conclude this particular session, one takeaway from at Marks, if you can share in the Mother Nature department, if possible.
Ramu, I mean, we do small things as a printer, maybe put some solar panels here and there for energy.
Sure.
But beyond it is beyond the scope of a printer right now.
Okay.
But I would have very small, simple observations for which even I have not got answers. Maybe the experts here can also, comment on it.
Sure.
I mean, if we look at a label industry, I think it is the most inefficient. It is. Yeah. The liner is completely a waste, and we are not doing anything much about the liner. It's only 50% material which comes to use.
Correct.
So simple stuff like PET liner, which is like kind of gaining popularity abroad, but it's completely, I would say, not acceptable in India.
Yep.
We still dependent a lot on siliconized paper, which has its own supply chain issues.
Yeah.
But PET, on the other hand, gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of, advantage of, higher productivity, all that, reduce everything. But it's still not taken up, So this is something that I think is a low-hanging fruit if industry comes together, because nothing else needs to change on the brand. It's a carrier for the labels. If we look at it, secondly, even applications like e-com labels or barcode labels or logistic labels, these are something which can be very easily shifted to linerless.
Yeah.
I think linerless is not something anything new. Or typical sellotape we have been using for ages, a yellow sticky pad we have been using for ages. So why not an address label that can be done linerless? This is something that, again, I think there are economic benefits to adapt, and that should remove any friction of taking it up. And lastly, on the ink side, I would say maybe companies like Sigwork and other stuff, simple stuff like, promoting your UV LED inks instead of conventional inks. Simple stuff like that, reduces energy consumption of a printer to up to almost 70-80%.
Sure.
So this is, again, I would say, a low-hanging fruit. It is just some pricing strategies that need to come in place. But imagine all the printers shifting to this is as good as, nobody buying a conventional bulb today. We all are using LED bulbs in our day-to-day lives.
Got it.
So why not get into this? It's something doable.
Yep. Got it, CK. We have a LED UV ink masterclass, I think, on 7th of April with one of the German experts from Sigwork. So I'll probably let you know about it also. I'll just quickly, there are 2 or 3 questions. I know we are like completely running out of time. So the first question is from Amit Sharma. Thank you, Amit. We've seen COVID's, anybody from the panel can take it. We've seen COVID's negative consequences to the print industry, but surely there must be some key positives as well. So if the panel members foresee in the coming future, specifically from print industry perspective, please share your thought. So I think what he wants to know is if there's been any positive in the past 20-24 months. If anybody can take that.
I think I can share one perspective in terms of the positive.
Yes, please.
And that positive is that how you can manage, and one can manage his own supply chain and eventually delivering a better value to the customers. And in the process, we are a business of competition also. So in the process, you establish yourself in a much better standing in the eyes of the customers. You show your reliability. So the entire, those are the difficult period when lockdown 1.0, 2.0, by the time people now get habituated and have their templates ready, how to handle the situation. But I remember, in early 2020, when we had the first nationwide lockdown, the way we tried to handle the entire supply chain and eventually reached out to the customers and ensure that their operations, and many of them are into essential goods and essential article segments. So that is an opportunity for an organization to really engage with the customers to ensure customers' operations stay uninterrupted. That's one of the things I thought I'd mention here.
Got that. There's one more question that's from Thomas Abraham of Hatchet. He asks that in a conference many years ago at Thiruvananthapuram, the book printers were talking of a collective regarding a printing city to match the Chinese. With today's reality and integration across the whole print to end consumer chain, can they come together to set up a collective that works in a supply chain solution? Gautam, since you were a part of it, would you want to try that?
Yeah, Ramu, if I recall correctly, at that time, that group met a couple of times. I think, if I recall correctly, 3 meetings.
Yep.
But I think, each one's priorities were different and no one could agree on a way forward.
Yeah.
And I think that challenge exists even today. I think there's an opportunity for few of the at least the book printers to, work together, come together. But when you're each one's ultimate, and not for any wrong reason, but each one's motivation and what they want as end game will be, if it's different, it's very hard to do that. So I think right now, I don't know unless someone really takes the lead, I would be very happy to be part of it. So,
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the only thing, Thomas, I can add to that is that the collective was formed, and as Gautam said, that the 15 big majors had met. Two positives that emerged from it was collective presence at Frankfurt Book Fair and London Book Fair. So that was good. And the second thing was, I think, price negotiations. I think for the first time, book printers could, demand the price, and collectively everybody stuck to that. So those were the two gains. And then, as Gautam pointed out, that the Print City project per se, I think there was a consultant brought in and they examined the pros and cons, etc. But that maybe one can revisit that now. It's a good idea. All right. Ashesh, there are two ink-related questions. I'll just ask those. And I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but what is the future of soya vegetable inks? I think Ashwini ji had also asked that. Is there a likelihood of demand and future demand for the same? And again, I think it's a follow-up to that, development of vegetable oil-based cold set web offset inks in the future. And again, more of the same, herbal found solution, replacing bio-C with neem extracts and replacing other harmful chemicals with bioenzymes, etc. And can we shift to vegetable? So more or less, I think it's a kind of.
So I'll combine my answer and
yes.
So I think of course it's a huge future, great future for the vegetable oils, substituting the mineral oils as we move forward, because mineral oils has some constituents into it which poses serious health hazards, not only for the customers, that's the people who are handling at the presses, but also eventually to the consumers. And that's why, precisely as I said earlier, that we decided to have it completely replaced by the vegetable oils. And vegetable oils, it could be soy oil, it could be palm oil, etc. Now, there is no regulation in the country as we speak, but I think as we earlier mentioned, that we are also trying to engage, and we have been engaging with all the stakeholders to people to understand and make this changeover happen as we move forward. So yes, to answer the question is, of course, is an emphatic yes. Answer is emphatic yes. We see bigger opportunity, bigger growth potential. From tomorrow to tomorrow and day after tomorrow, we have 2 sessions, technology and innovations. I think there will be a lot of discussions going to happen there. So people who had asked these questions for better understanding of the subject, I request them to attend tomorrow and day after tomorrow's session, when we have panelists from SIGWA will be talking on the same subject. But yes, answer is yes.
All right, I think we're done. One final question to all of you. This is a sort of half fun, half serious sort of question. Now, the question is, if you were stuck in the elevator with the Minister of Finance and Corporate Affairs of India, what is the one thing you would like to tell her, a kind of a wish list for the industry? So, so on a serious note, we are trying to prepare a kind of a list of 10 items which we can share with Nirmala Sitaraman. So if anything that you could share, out of the box, most welcome. So CK, can we start with you and then go to Ashwini ji, Gautam, and yeah. One, up mute hand.
Sorry, 2 things come to my mind being a printer. I think we are heavily dependent on machinery imports, and that has a lot of GST impact when we import these machines, or even any capital goods that we buy from India. So a lot of capital is locked before even the production starts. So there should be some way of, getting a refund on unutilized, input tax credit on the GST, which does not exist today. And alternatively, there can be a scenario when, we all are talking about Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat. It can be, GST can be, like a zero rated on, certain, priority sector machineries. So if the machines are there in India, I think the manufacturing will be more encouraged, and that could, spring into a different revolution. So that's something that I could think of. Even on, on the PLI scheme, I think all the sectors have gone in, textiles and pharma and everything, but we don't have any representation from paper or packaging. So being a priority sector, this is something, if government can do about it, that would be something wonderful.
Yeah. So I think in CapExL under PLI, there is some representation, no? And they're talking of whatever, 25,000 crore. This is the to boost for exports, right? Primarily promotional, this thing for exports.
But
anyway, we can, yeah. But anyway, yeah. All right, Ashwini?
Yeah, I think one thing comes to my mind, which is to encourage some kind of an innovation and putting it to practice, especially when it comes to sustainability or sustainable solutions for packaging. Sure. If there is any kind of incentive or any kind of grants or subsidies for research and innovation in that space.
Yeah,
that's about it.
Yeah. So something like an IDC or a NID, but doing a hub for sustainable design. Is that what you're suggesting? Sorry,
I mean, yeah, that's an even better idea. But if anybody individually or as a company is working in that space,
sure,
if there are any incentives or subsidies.
Okay, got it. Got it. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Gautam?
Two things come to my mind. One is, I think, quick and easy. I think considering what's happening with the newspaper industry, right from structural changes to the issues with Russia, newsprint, etc., I think if the government could step in and reverse what they've done on the import duties in the previous budget, I think that's a quick and easy one. The second one is in reference to the PLI schemes and all that, and what Abraham said before. I think if the government could take initiative and see, considering what's happening geopolitically, I think India is in a special place right now. We hope India will stay in a special place. And so if what can be done to make the Indian print industry, an alternate or, very competitive, if they take interest in that, because individually, while they're small, I think collectively it's a large industry and it's a large demand. There's an opportunity, I think, to, move India on the export front. So.
Sure, got that. Thanks, Gautam. Ashesh?
So I think that, eventually this industry, the success of the industry is completely consumption. I mean, more and more consumers consume packaging, more FMCG sales, more product sales, the packaging industry thrives, right? So eventually at a finance ministry level, I'm sure they have been trying to do that. That how we can give more, money in the hands of the middle class. And eventually I'll bring to my favorite topic of the income tax. So where all of us are also stakeholders to that. So I think that gives more money in the hands of people and more consumption, and that will eventually make the industry thrive. So whatever government can do to push the consumption, to create consumption, to create more demand of the consumer products, it's good for the industry.
Got that. Thanks. Priya?
What we would like is that, the book should have GST on it, everything that goes into the book, whether it, all the, materials that go into it has got GST on it, but the end product is exempt. So it should have GST so that, it'll also mitigate a lot of piracy that is happening. It will also, we need to formalize the sector and, start getting some input credit, etc. So that will be the top thing to do. Yeah.
Good. That's 6 good suggestions. Thank you very much, all of you. It's been spectacular. 2 hours. Thank you very much. I'm done. Sriram, yes, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ramu. An excellent discussion. Thank you, everyone, again. Lots and lots of questions and food for thought, I think. The answer, we think, lies in how we tweak the system. a 360-degree approach to rebalancing technology, process, profits, industry contribution, and how we find a way to reboot it overall. Having said that, the enormous task of reconstruction will require coordination from all the stakeholders involved also. And we hope the discussion was about the crisis that we were in. So we hope we also turned the corner for the crisis of the last 2 years with the pandemic and COVID with regards to supply chain, raw materials, etc. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us, especially our panelists. As I sign off, I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Like Ashesh pointed out, we have lots coming up in the next few days. Tomorrow especially is about the technology, the marvel and magic of inks, where we deep dive into the technology of inks. We have 5 leading ink stalwarts talking about the science and the future of inks. And it would be great to have all of you in that session. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.